Right now, we are in front of the Charlottesville police station. I want to show you where this alleged assault happened. It happened right over here in this parking garage on the other side of those motorcycles, just feet from the police station. Weeks before basic training, he took a vacation with classmates and he left quite an impression.
Someone lost their life, and so many people were hurt. It's horrifying.
She can't wrap her head around the carnage in Charlottesville.
I was shocked to find out it was someone I knew.
Police say James Fields drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters Saturday afternoon during a white nationalist rally. Marissa, who asked we not reveal her last name for her own safety, graduated high school with Fields in Boone County in 2015.
He would proclaim himself as a Nazi.
In school?
Yes, it was not a secret.
She also traveled to Europe with him and 24 other students weeks after graduation.
Once we got to France, he refused to shower because he wasn't a fan of the French and their involvement in World War II.
Then Marissa says she saw Fields do this.
We also went to Germany, where he spit on a Soviet war memorial that was honoring the Soviet soldiers and their involvement in World War II.
Keegan McGrath tells the 9 on Your Side I-Team he was on the same trip. He says Fields disturbed him so much he came back to the U.S. early.
We were going from France to Germany, and he was like, I just want to get through this part of the trip so that I can get to the fatherland.
Marissa's dad, Mark, chaperoned the 16-day trip and says he befriended Fields.
I didn't want him going off through a foreign city by himself, and quite often it seemed like he had no one else to go with.
The boy who Marissa says was so quiet in high school is now a 20-year-old man accused of killing Heather Heyer and hurting 19 others in the name of hate, while Marissa wants the country to heal.
I want people to know that these things happen, and this is who he is.
This is where police say James Fields drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters on Saturday. Tonight it has turned into a growing memorial, and the only way to describe this is moving. People are focusing on hope and love and community instead of difference and hate. Sheriff Reeder has said all along that figuring out who murdered 8 members of the Rhoden family and arresting them is like putting pieces of a puzzle together. That has not changed despite those weekend searches. Here's what I discovered today, and you see on some Chopper 9 footage from last Friday that detectives searching through several trailers on property where a business called Unlimited Motors is located. I spoke with the property owner today who said the trailers and all that stuff belongs to a guy named Jake Wagner and his family. He says the Wagners dropped off the trailers about 10 days ago and he was supposed to store it for them temporarily. A Rhoden family member tells me Jake Wagner is the ex-boyfriend of Hannah Rhoden, a 19-year-old who was shot and killed along with 7 other members of her family last April. She's also the mother of the 4-day-old baby that wasn't hurt in the shooting. Jake Wagner and Hannah Rhoden were in a custody dispute over an older daughter they shared, and there were questions if Jake was the father of the 4-day-old. Over the weekend, we confirmed through property records that the other 2 properties investigators searched on Friday and Saturday are also connected to the Wagner family. The Rhoden murders have gone unsolved for 14 months. Police have never identified any suspects except to say they believe whoever did it knew the family well. And I asked Sheriff Reeder today about Jake Wagner's whereabouts. He would not comment. I also reached out to the Attorney General's office, and they're declining to comment about anything that has to do with this investigation about those searches. We're live in Pike County. Hillary Lake, 9 on Your Side. And we want to make it very clear that James Manley is not charged as a suspect. He's not a suspect in the Rhoden murder case itself. There are still no suspects that have been named in that case. We made the trip about 20 minutes from the Pike County Courthouse to Chillicothe, and I just checked, and James Manley is currently in the process of being released from the Ross County Jail. He was brought here because there is no jail in Pike County. Now, this is a murder case with still no named suspects, but family of some of the victims are feeling the pressure.
The system sucks.
Words from a frustrated father who showed up at Pike County Court Wednesday morning to support his son, James Manley. James is accused of destroying a GPS tracking device he found on his own truck. Investigators say they put it there last month without him knowing.
You know, if they put one on mine, I'm going to destroy it too.
James's father, Leonard Manley, doesn't understand why detectives are trying to watch his son. Investigators have already said James is a witness in the Roden murder case, not a suspect. And Leonard says James didn't even own that truck the night someone killed his daughter, Dana Roden, and 7 of her family members.
They ain't gonna find no one gonna say that word about my son or my daughter, because they were real touched.
Leonard says he now believes a text message his son sent to a guy named Jake Wagner the night of the murders is the real reason detectives put the GPS on James's truck. Jake Wagner shares a child with Leonard's granddaughter, Hannah Roden. Hannah was also killed.
That boy used to come to my house for all the holidays, and all at once he won't even bring the baby up here to get a present.
Leonard says his son and Jake Wagner were not close. 3 days before James Manley's arrest for messing with that GPS, investigators targeted Wagner. Last weekend, they searched several properties connected to him for evidence in the Roden murder case. One of the property owners told the I-Team Monday Wagner left 3 full trailers there about 2 weeks ago to temporarily store. Investigators haven't said why they raided Wagner's property. As for Leonard Manley, he says James had nothing to do with his sister's murder.
I'd take my life on it.
And James Manley is due back in court next week in Pike County for a preliminary hearing, that is. We're live in Ross County. Hillary Lake, 9 on your side. Well, guys, this is a pretty long scene. It goes from about a quarter of a mile north of where I'm standing near Lynn Street and ends here under the 8th Street Viaduct. I'm going to step out of the way and give you a look at the scene. Police tell me the suspect shot and killed himself in that van under the bridge. No one else is hurt. And there is no one in there because it is still closed to the public. As for the investigation itself, investigators are looking at everything from the ride itself to talking to witnesses, and that will take time. Well, some of the parents I spoke with today are out here tonight protesting in front of Carson Elementary School. They tell me they feel like the school just isn't taking bullying seriously. They're not upset about the school releasing the surveillance video, but they are upset about what they see on it. What we discovered boils down to a technicality with truck keys and poor communication.
Hello, Cincinnati Police. He's in there.
From the truck cab
He's right here.
to the curb.
What's going on?
Relaxing.
You're not relaxing. What'd you take?
A big rig driver high on heroin on a city street.
Did you take some heroin today?
Earlier.
Just now? Did you overdose?
3 weeks later, police say Scotty Kinman
Ma'am, you said he slumped over?
did drugs behind the wheel again, this time during rush hour on the interstate.
Yes, in his driver's seat, but now the truck is rolling backwards on 74.
It's just no different than an 80,000-pound time bomb, because that's all it is.
Seconds is all police in the village of Cleves had after a different driver overdosed in a tanker truck at a gas station. The I-Team first told you about Christopher Phoenix in July.
If he had rolled out and bumped into a station with the pumps, that could have been catastrophic for a small town like ours.
Tracy Grome asked the 9 on Your Side I-Team for answers about how drug truck drivers end up behind the wheel in the first place, putting other drivers in danger.
I'm just absolutely livid. What do you expect when you ingest heroin and get behind an 18-wheeler?
Grome recalls her front row seat to the near disaster on I-74 near Green Township.
And I thought that he had died. He was gray, his lips were blue.
The I-Team obtained a police report showing Kinman provided investigators with a written statement saying, quote, "All I remember is waking up on the ground." We also discovered 24 days before that August overdose on the interstate, Cincinnati police found him high on heroin in the same truck.
Your eyes are still pinpoint, man. Don't lie to me.
Police charged Kinman with disorderly conduct instead of drugged driving because his keys weren't in the ignition.
What are the trunking companies doing? You know, were they aware of his arrest a month ago?
Kinman's company, J&S Transport Incorporated, wouldn't talk to me on camera about his drug use. The company's safety manager tells me she didn't know the truth about his arrest for disorderly conduct. She says he continued driving until his OVI arrest here on I-74. Kentucky even renewed his commercial driver's license 9 days before that arrest because his previous arrest wasn't on his record.
How many truck drivers are there out there on the road that we have no idea that are practicing in this type of behavior.
The I-Team took Kinman and Phoenix's cases to Tom Balzer. He represents the trucking industry in Ohio.
This is an abnormality. It's something that does not happen every day.
Balzer says the industry as a whole has the best safety record since the 1950s.
To say that why did the employer miss it, there's some responsibility on the driver as well.
Federal rules require random drug testing for just 25% of truck drivers on the road each year.
A driver may go several years and never be tested unless there's an incident that occurs.
Kentucky State Police Sergeant Jason Morris tells the I-Team states are not required to communicate with each other about trucker arrests, although some do.
And if the states do not communicate with each other, then you have that instance where the driver may never have anything come back on his driver's license.
Remember, that's exactly what happened with Scotty Kinman's first arrest in Cincinnati. Sergeant Morris also says law enforcement isn't required to tell trucking companies about employee arrests.
The drivers are required to tell them. Of course, we all know that that doesn't happen in most instances.
Kinman's employer tells the I-Team it found out about his DUI arrest by watching the news.
He looks like he is as high as a kite.
Sergeant Morris thinks mandatory communication among state driving agencies, law enforcement, and trucking companies would help keep all drivers safe.
There can always be better communication.
Tracy Grome thinks so too.
There's time for a change.
Sit down.
I mean, clearly, it's a different time now.
Or you're being arrested.
And Scotty Kinman pled guilty to OVI in September. He's currently in jail, and his driver's license and his CDL are suspended for a year. The other driver, Christopher Phoenix, entered an inpatient rehab center last week as part of a deal he made with drug court. His driver's licenses are also suspended, and we do plan on taking what we discovered about that communication breakdown to state and federal lawmakers to see what they have to say about it, and we'll let you know what they have to say. Driving a truck like this requires a special driver's license, and it comes with a lot of responsibility. I promised to take the results of our investigation into drugged truck drivers to state and federal lawmakers. I did. Here's what they have to say. Tens of thousands of big rigs crisscross the tri-state every day, driving right beside you. Now imagine watching one of those machines jackknife on I-74 near Green Township.
I started screaming and blowing my horn, stop.
And then learning the driver is high on heroin.
Frothing from the mouth. His body was very rigid, and I thought that he had died.
You know how much damage you can cause if you go out of control with one of those 18-wheelers?
The I-Team took the findings of our investigation into drug truck drivers to a state senator from Cincinnati, Cecil Thomas.
I was shocked.
The I-Team first discovered this wasn't the first time that driver, Scotty Kinman, had overdosed behind the wheel.
So you're thinking he's in the back sleeper part of the cab?
Body camera video
Let me see your hands.
from 3 weeks before that August crash shows Cincinnati police found him high in the same truck, pulled over on a city street.
All right, have a seat, sir.
Tracy Grome asked the I-Team to find out why Kinman was allowed back on the road.
What are the trucking companies doing? You know, were they aware of his arrest a month ago?
Kinman's company tells the I-Team Kinman lied about his first arrest, but they didn't realize that until the crash on I-74. We discovered law enforcement isn't required to notify trucking companies about driver arrests.
The drivers are required to tell them. Of course, we all know that that doesn't happen in most instances.
Jurisdiction complicates things a bit. Every state has its own laws for the trucking industry, but many, like Kentucky and Ohio, choose to enforce federal rules. I asked U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown about that.
I think that your series, once it's finished and we really see all the evidence, might cause us to take some action on the intersection, if you will, of opioids and truck driving.
State Senator Thomas tells me he wants to try to fix the communication breakdown. What are you willing to do?
Well, I'm willing to introduce legislation to, number one, require our law enforcement personnel to contact, to make it legal for them to contact the company.
Senator Thomas says a change to the state law will take some time, but he's working on it so you stay safe on the roads. Senator Cecil Thomas tells me that any legislation he introduces probably won't go anywhere in Columbus until sometime next year. I will keep tracking that for you. And one other note, I did reach out to U.S. Senator Rob Portman about this investigation. Through a spokeswoman, he declined comment. Hillary Lake, 9 on your side.